Hello and welcome to the local campaign. We are here inside our Rogers TV Kitchener studios preparing for a candidates debate for the Waterloo riding. My name is Sean Furfaro. I'm privileged to be serving as the moderator for today's debate. So let's get right to it and introduce our participants for the candidates for the Waterloo riding. We have joining us here in studio today representing the Green Party of Ontario, Shefaza Esmail. Representing the Ontario New Democratic Party, Catherine Fife. Representing the Electoral Reform Party, Peter House, and representing the Liberal Party of Ontario, Clayton Moore. Not present for this debate, but also appearing on the ballot for the Waterloo region, from the PC Party of Ontario, Peter Turkington, from the New Blue Party, Suja Bieber, the Ontario Party, Chris Martin, and from the Ontario Libertarian Party, James Schultz. We do thank the four candidates who are here with us in studio today, and we are looking forward to having a nice, healthy debate among everybody. So let me go through the overall rules for today. We're going to start off with some opening remarks from our four candidates who are lined up left to right alphabetically. We will start in that order. After that, we'll proceed to a Q&A round where we get through a few questions, and each candidate will have the equal opportunity to answer the same question. I'll pose a question, and they'll each have 1 minute to respond. We'll alternate who goes first, but all four will go in order. If there are rebuttals, there will be an opportunity for 30 seconds for rebuttals. And then at the end of our Q&A round, we'll wrap it up with 1 minute each for closing statements. I would ask that everybody please adhere to the guidelines with regards to the time allotment. We've got a timer here so you can see how soon you are to the end of your 1 minute. And we'd ask you to please not speak while any of the other candidates are speaking. So with that, we will proceed directly to our opening statements. And Shefaza, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Rogers TV, for having me for this local campaign for Waterloo riding. My name is Shefaza Esmail. I am the Ontario Green candidate for Waterloo riding, and I'm running this time, and I ran previously as well, because I want to see an improvement in the quality of life for Ontarians, especially in Waterloo region. I think that our well-being is at risk right now with access to healthcare, intercity public transit, and shelter being taken away by policies, and especially our environmental protections being taken away by policies. And we need to see a future where we can all live and prosper and provide for our future generations, and we need to start that now. So we deserve better, and that's why I am running in this election.
Shefaza, thank you. We'll move on to Catherine.
Thank you. My name is Catherine Fife. I'm running for re-election. I have served the community of Waterloo for over 12 years now, winning a by-election in 2012. It has been the privilege and honor of my life. I like to say that Waterloo region has taught me how to be a strong leader in the community, and I've taken a lot of direction and had some amazing mentors over that time period. This election is so important. What I'm hearing at the door around healthcare, housing, education, these are issues that Ontarians deeply care about. And yet here we are in an election 16 months early, and I must address the reason why this is happening. Doug Ford has said that he needed a mandate, even though he has a majority government. We are now under threat of these debilitating tariffs, and this is the chance, this is the time that Doug Ford chose to quit on Ontario. Lots of work to do. I'm looking forward to the debate today, and I'm also looking forward to your support on February 27th.
Thank you, Catherine. Peter?
Hi, I'm Peter House. I'm the founding leader of the Electoral Reform Party, and I'm running on, electoral reform, ranked ballots, proportional representation. So you don't need to strategically vote, and so the makeup of the legislature better reflects the way you do vote. More importantly than that, we need a competitive voting system so that we aren't bouncing back and forth between liberal and conservative governments. In a competitive system, they would need to rethink their entire strategy and their campaign platform. I'm running on holding town halls in the riding every month. You could put me on the spot, ask me tough questions, upload my answer online, embarrass me for all the world to see. How else are we supposed to hold our politicians accountable? And how are they supposed to know what their constituents actually want if they aren't engaging with them on a regular basis? I'm running on tying my salary to my approval rating amongst my constituents here in Waterloo, because what good are you anyways as a politician if your own constituents don't approve of what you're doing? But also, I'm trying to set an example for these other guys. Like, if everybody was tying their salary to their approval rating, they could say, sorry, Mr. Party Whip, I'm not voting the way you want me to vote. I'm going with my constituents on this one. You wouldn't be watching this debate if you were voting for the Conservatives, you wouldn't be watching this debate if you're voting for the Conservatives. I just say that, how are these other candidates going to do what they're campaigning on without electoral reform?
Thank you, Peter. Clayton, we'll close it out with you. 1 minute.
Thank you, Sean. My name is Clayton Moore, and I'm running to be Waterloo's next member of provincial parliament. I'm not exactly a natural politician. My background is in science. I studied molecular biology and genetics and then moved on to bioinformatics. But what got me involved is that I'm worried about the future. Too often, I'm seeing governments that are focused on the next election rather than the next generation. And we're already starting to see the consequences of that. We have a healthcare crisis where 2.5 million Ontarians don't have access to a family doctor. Life's too affordable for too many people, and housing is just out of reach for too many. And on top of that, our education system has been underfunded for entirely too long. That's putting the next generation at risk. The cracks in our system are already showing. And we cannot afford another 4 years of Doug Ford actively mismanaging or attacking the systems that so many people rely on. As your next member of provincial parliament, I promise to fight to protect public health care, fight for education, and make life more affordable for everybody. Because we deserve a government that fights for you.
Thank you, Clayton, and thank you to all 4 of our candidates for your opening remarks. Now, based on these opening remarks, my first question is short and sweet. Catherine, we'll start with you on this. What is the most pressing issue facing Waterloo right now, and how do you plan to address it?
Yeah, so I mean, it's actually a hard answer to give, but at the top is healthcare, I would say. This is top of mind at the doors. People are scared out there. 2.5 million Ontarians do not have a family doctor. This is problematic because family doctors are really the gatekeepers to the entire healthcare system. Our plan is to invest $4.1 billion to reinvigorate the healthcare human resources crisis that we're experiencing. And we got here because Doug Ford brought in an unconstitutional piece of legislation called Bill 124, which capped salaries at 1%. Unfortunately, this drove out really qualified people from the healthcare sector. Out-migration in Ontario is a profound problem. We need to reestablish respect for the very people who are in our system: personal support workers, registered nurses, RPNs, NPNs, and doctors.
And Peter, in your opinion, what's the most pressing issue facing Waterloo right now, and how do you plan to address it?
I think the biggest problem right now is voter apathy and feeling like we don't have somebody in government that represents us. There's a lot bigger issues right now than just getting, electoral reform and accountability of government, except pretty much all of them are predicated on having those 2 things happen. We had a 40% voter turnout last time, and that speaks to a public that doesn't like the options available to them on the ballot. When I knock doors, people are thrilled to see me because I don't represent one of these other parties they already hate. And it seems to me that, Waterloo is an amazing riding to run in because it wouldn't really matter what party you were representing. If the students were backing you, you could pull off quite the upset. I think healthcare, like Catherine said, is probably the biggest thing that people are talking about at the doors, but people are really worried about these tariffs and what's going on in the States. It's the economy. It's going to be a really tough province.
Thank you, Peter. And Clayton?
The number one issue in this election right now is healthcare. 2.5 million Ontarians don't have access to a family doctor. That's the equivalent of about the population of Toronto, with people without access to primary care. That's people that are being forced into emergency rooms for treatments that should have been just dealt with in clinics. That means that everyone's experiencing longer wait times, and we've simply got to do something about this. That's why the Ontario Liberal Party has a plan to invest $3.1 billion into recruiting, retaining, and integrating over 3,000 new doctors into our system to make sure that every single person in Ontario is partnered with a family doctor within the first 4 years of the Ontario Liberal Party's mandate. Because people need access to stable, reliable health care. I'm one of those 2.5 million without access to a family doctor. That means every time that I need care, and millions other like me, you're forced into emergency rooms that make it tougher for people that desperately need help to get it. It means we're facing a drastic hallway healthcare crisis, and we need to fix this. Doug Ford's been actively privatizing our system, and I'm here to fight for public healthcare because it's absolutely what we need here in Ontario.
And Shefaza?
I think the biggest issue right now is our well-being, and that connects very well to healthcare, which has already been talked about. But when we talk about healthcare and well-being of our Ontarians, we need to look at preventative healthcare as well as active healthcare. So we need the connection of community and access to environmental areas so that we can recharge ourselves and exercise, have better public transit so that we can do active modes of transportation so that we can keep ourselves healthy. And then on the other side, we need to have better wage compensation and appreciation for our healthcare professionals as well as our educators so that they can then pass on that enthusiasm to the patients that they care for as well as the students that they teach. And this is really where we need to look at interconnected policies to build a better Ontario.
Thank you, Shefaza. Thank you to all four of our candidates. I'm hearing a lot of concern about healthcare, so let's move on to healthcare. Access to healthcare will be the topic for the next question or two. As of July 2024, as you mentioned, Clayton, 2.5 million Ontarians do not have a family doctor. So I would ask the four of you, how would you increase access to healthcare professionals in our community? And Peter, I'll come to you first.
All right, well, a lot of family doctors are talking about the overhead of just running their own practice, and I know that the NDP and I think you Liberals are also running on trying to make that more manageable for our doctors so that they can actually get to tending to their patients as opposed to running the business. But, you know, the Ford government is underspending on healthcare intentionally. He's trying to make the system fail on purpose because he wants to garner support for a privatized system like they have in the States. And if you know Canadians at all, you know that we like our public health care. That's not something that's acceptable here. And Doug Ford should be ashamed of himself. I think beyond, just regular family doctor access, we need to be talking about, the wider health services available to us, like access to psychotherapy. People can't afford that. We need to make things like that more available and affordable for people. Because, like Shefaza was saying, it's our well-being in general that's at stake here. And we want Ontarians to be healthy. Thank you.
And Clayton.
Let's be clear here. Our public healthcare system is under attack by a government that wants to privatize healthcare. He is actively making decisions that's going to make it harder for you and your family to access healthcare without taking out your credit card. That is an absolute disgrace. The number one priority here needs to be making sure that we've got enough doctors immediately and that we never find ourselves in this situation again. The Ontario Liberal Party has a real plan to address this. That $3.1 billion is going to make a meaningful difference into recruiting, retaining, and integrating doctors to make sure that we can partner everybody. There are already 1,200 doctors that are foreign trained who aren't practicing medicine here in Ontario. That is an immediate source of doctors that we can make sure that they enter our public health care system and actually start seeing patients to address the problem right now. On top of that, we got to make sure that we're opening up 2 new medical schools in Ontario to make sure that we never find ourselves in this situation again. Because you shouldn't be wondering if you're going to be able to get health care in a few years. This is a crisis now, and we need solutions to make sure that we solve it today and plan forward into the future.
And Shefaza.
Increasing funding to the healthcare system is also part of the Green Party platform, but increasing funding is not going to help alone. We also need to reduce the administrative burden on doctors so that they can provide more care for their patients and introduce a more centralized referral system so that people can access the services that they need where they are. I have heard from people who are taking transit or need a ride to go all the way to Toronto for testing, which could also have been done in Waterloo region. So there needs to be better access in that sense, and increasing funding will need to come with accountability of these kind of centralized referral systems, and that's part of the Green Party platform. We would also want to remove negation. Unlike Clayton, I do have a family doctor, but mine is in Mississauga, so if I need to visit a clinic here, my doctor gets charged for that, and that is not fair. So we would remove negation so that I can continue to have my family doctor.
And Catherine, we'll close out this question with you.
Thank you, Sean. We are literally fighting for public health care in Ontario. After serving as the finance critic for the last 3.5 years, I can tell you that the money is directly being siphoned off to support for-profit private clinics, essentially cannibalizing the public health care system. The NDP has a strategy to reinvigorate the healthcare human resources, but we've taken our lead and we've directed our policy based on what we've learned from those who are on the front lines. One of the areas that we will definitely be focusing on is family health teams, because family health teams are places where doctors actually want to work. They feel supported, they actually get to spend more time with their patients, they actually get to do what they're trained to do. So removing the administrative burden, as Shefaza has mentioned, is a key recommendation. Targeted funding for rural and northern communities so that they have nurse practitioners, but the family health team is the model that we support.
Thank you to the four of you. Continuing under the banner, technically, of access to health care, my next question regards community mental health. And Clayton, we'll start with you on this one. Mental health is a growing concern. Access to resources can be fraught with lengthy delays. How will your party ensure that those in need of mental health supports have both access to services and the ability to find out how to access them?
Thank you, Sean. Let's be clear here. Mental health is health. We need to make sure that that everyone has access to care when they need it. We need to make sure that you're not stuck waiting in lines for emergency rooms for 15 plus hours. So to do that, we need to make sure that we're expanding team health so that you've got access to care on evenings, on weekends. On top of that, we have two incredible universities here in town who have been underfunded to such an extent that they've had to cut mental health supports for students who often deal with incredibly stressful times. That is a direct result of Doug Ford siphoning money away from systems that support people. And there have been incredibly tough decisions. So we need to make sure that we're funding not only our healthcare system, but universities and post-secondary institutions to make sure that everyone's got access to mental health when they need it. Because this is a huge component of people's lives, and we want to make sure that we're recognizing mental health as a crucial element of keeping healthy.
Thank you, Clayton. And Shefaza, same question for you.
Access to mental health care is definitely top of mind on the Green Party platform. And I would say we're looking at root causes of mental health. What is causing people to have problems where they are where they are struggling? So is it lack of housing? Is it lack of connection? And the party platform addresses all of these in terms of community well-being, creating neighborhoods where people can connect with each other and not just have houses, but actually have spaces in zoning laws so that people can gather with each other, so there's less loneliness. Increased public transit so that people can connect with family and friends across Ontario. And then in terms of mental health supports, increase the wraparound supports that nonprofit organizations can provide by increasing funding to nonprofit organizations.
Thank you, Shefaza. And Catherine, mental health supports and access.
Yeah, so community-based mental health supports is the model that we have been championing at Queen's Park now for over a decade. And it's very close and personal for me. Caitlin Roth was a young woman in Waterloo region who sought help, and that help was not there for her, except for a 2-year wait list. And so I've been working with the Roth family specifically to ensure that community-based mental health centers have the funding. Not only is this the compassionate and moral and ethical thing to do, it is absolutely will alleviate the pressure on our acute healthcare system, hospitals. When you're experiencing a mental health crisis, going to an emergency room is the exact wrong space to be in. So we've reinvested and encouraged the government to look at not only the cost savings of providing community-based mental health, but also meeting that moment and addressing the stigma around mental health.
Thank you, Catherine. And Peter, same question for you.
Mental health is so important. I don't think that people are putting enough emphasis on access to mental health services. I see my fellow candidates here are talking about it, but it's not just about having dollars funded towards it or having places to go. It's about actually having people that you're able to actually go to. I don't know. There's a lot of stigma around mental health that shouldn't be there. Our mental health got a lot worse over the pandemic. People's finances are stressed. It's contributing to all these things. But actually, being able to reach out and meet these people is really hard. I think, online mental health has become a boom over the course of the pandemic and since, and we should be supporting a lot more of that and making it easier to actually reach out to these people and people to reach out to mental health. It should be part of the healthcare system at large.
Thank you to the four of you for answering an important and difficult question. We will move on to the topic of affordable housing. So, Shefaza, we will start with you on this one. The question is, will you push for increased provincial funding for more supportive housing projects in Waterloo?
Absolutely. Not only will we push for more provincial support for affordable housing, but we're also putting forward plans to reduce the burden on people financially to be able to afford a home. And we're going to make sure that housing that can be put forward with provincial funding also provides that community feeling, so that it's not just housing, it's wraparound support for community, so that people can feel connected to each other. And that includes giving funding as well to nonprofit organizations, so that they know they are working on the ground and they know what kind of supports people need in order to not just be sheltered but also be homed. So that's what the Green Party platform looks at, is reducing the financial burden for homeowners as well as increasing more affordable units and housing options.
Thank you, Shefaza. Catherine, same question.
Thank you. And I just want to connect it to the last topic. I mean, housing is healthcare. We know this. Without shelter, people get very sick and it's very costly. And so there's definitely an economic argument to be made for investment in housing. The Ontario NDP has a plan called Homes Ontario. We are looking at getting back into the business of building deeply attainable, affordable housing. This is every other province across this great country is doing this because they've recognized that, you know, the private sector is not necessarily going to build non-market housing. So this is one of our key parts, but we also have been talking really honestly about renters in Ontario. One of the first things that Doug Ford did was he removed rent control, which destabilized an already destabilized housing sector. Renters deserve the same protection. I'm working with a group in Waterloo right now who are being renovicted for greed. There's no other good reason. There's no reason to kick these good people out of their homes, and we will protect them.
And Peter, same question for you.
Just go back to the health thing. Nobody talked about drugs and the drug problem that is proliferating Ontarian society. It's
Peter,
everywhere.
we are going to get to that in a further question.
Yeah.
The question is about affordable housing right now. So the question is, would you push for increased provincial funding for more supportive housing projects in Waterloo?
Well,
and I assure you that I will be asking a question that addresses that momentarily.
Fantastic. All right. Well, absolutely, yes, I would be putting more money towards that. We need non-market housing, housing that is cheaper than the going rate, that is subsidized, because that model actually works in countries around the world. We need to get rent control back in place because landlords are raising the rent with no limits in place on how much they can do that. In Norway, they have a housing project where they just give people housing and mental health skyrockets. People's health increases enormously. It's like Catherine was saying, housing is a health issue. And the way funding is set up currently, Ontario Works doesn't make much of a dent in the cost of rent right now. People are not able to afford a home even with, help from the government. And so we need cheaper rents and we need more help towards that stuff. Yeah, non-market housing is the real key here, guys. That's what we need.
And Clayton.
Housing is just too out of reach for entirely too many people these days. When I'm at the doors chatting with young people, they've completely abandoned hope that they'll ever even be able to afford a home. So we desperately need to start building in this province again. We need an additional 1.5 million homes by 2031. That's why the Ontario Liberal Party is committed to building more homes. We need to bring down the costs of that, of actually building, and on top of that, we need to protect renters. Because right now, Doug Ford's removed rent control, which meant that rent is getting more expensive consistently, which drives up the cost of housing, which makes it harder to afford a down payment. And we're stuck in this spiral where housing is getting further and further out of reach for too many people. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove development charges and fund the municipalities directly from a Better Communities Fund to drive down the cost of a house by an average of $170,000. And on top of that, we're bringing back in phased-in rent control so that renters can start to actually save up for housing, because nobody should have to struggle for housing here. Everyone deserves to have a place to call home.
Thank you, Clayton. Thank you to the four of you. I'm hearing renters, renoviction across the board. Did you want a rebuttal? 30 seconds, yes?
Just to add a part around the rental piece, right? I mean, the Liberals have said they're going to phase this in. What we saw when Doug Ford removed the protections for renters is that immediately people lost their housing. So I think that there is an urgency here, Sean, to ensuring that people who are already precariously housed, sometimes already underhoused, the renoviction that I was telling you about, a father lives with his 3 children in a 2-bedroom apartment. So he's already underhoused and he's going to lose that. So what I just want to emphasize the fact that at the end of the day, Doug Ford has truly just sided with the developers on this.
Peter, I see you want to say something, but I do want to let you know that my next topic is Renovictions. So I'm going to go there and give you each a full minute to talk on this, unless you'd like 30 seconds right now, Peter?
I'd still like to say something.
Go ahead.
Yeah, all right. Well, when it comes to building homes and saving to, own a home, there's a really interesting approach that's being done in Smooth Rock Falls. They are proposing, northern community, like 8 hours north of Toronto, they are proposing that they give, builders $100,000 towards their build, up to $200,000, covering half the cost of the build. Their community has been, dwindling in people that live there. This is their approach to try to drive, people to move there. It's working so well, and we should be doing things like that more in Ontario as well.
Thank you, Peter. Okay, so renovictions, I'm hearing across the board is a concern, so let's go there on my next question. Renovictions, technically speaking, where landlords evict tenants under the guise of renovations to raise rents. As you know, it's a growing issue in Ontario. A 2021 bill, Bill 58, the Rent Stabilization Act, aimed to curb this practice, but failed to practice. So I ask the 4 of you, would you support similar Ontario legislation, and how would you work to protect tenants? And Catherine, you're first.
Excellent question. And I'm going back to this example because it's in real time. So, 40 people are about to be renovicted from their apartments based on, the numbered company that owns the property coming in and saying they want to fix up the unit. When people remove themselves from those units, they jack up the rent when they come back. This is basically a huge loophole in the Act right now, and it's there by design, I would say. By the very fact that people can, experience this destabilization in their lives, and housing is everything, it's the basis for everything. There's no essential fines or penalties that are strong enough to deter this behavior. Therefore, municipalities can only bring in that $1,000 fine. That is not an effective deterrent. We need to establish laws which hold those numbered companies that are kicking seniors and families out of their only home that they know, and make it a real deterrent so it doesn't happen in Ontario anymore.
Thank you, Catherine. And Peter, would you support legislation to prevent renovictions, and how would you work to protect tenants?
Yes, of course, obviously. But, I think this problem really just comes down to dishonesty. How do you hold people accountable? I think you got to make it criminal. You got to actually get tough. You got to say to people that you might go to prison if you're pulling this crap. I think it's really that straightforward. You need actual things that are going to deter people from doing this, because it's unacceptable.
And Clayton?
Thank you, Sean. Renovictions are greed, pure and simple. What we're seeing all over the place is landlords claiming that they're going to be moving in, claiming that they're going to renovate, and then they jack up the prices. And they can get away with it too much because the landlord-tenant board is backed up. It is taking years to see these cases, and as a result, there's no consequences. So we absolutely need to make sure that we address what's happening with the landlord-tenant board so that your case is heard within months, not years, because renters deserve protections. On top of that, we need to make sure that renters who are at risk of not being able to afford rent for the next month have support. That's why we're going to introduce a new fund that's going to provide short-term zero-interest loans to renters who are at risk of losing their place, because it is so much better and so much easier to keep people in place. So renters need support right now. It's a tough housing market. It's tough to save. It's tough to aspire to home ownership right now. So we need to make sure we're fixing the landlord-tenant board, supporting renters where we can, and giving the people the chance to build a future here in Ontario.
And Shefaza, on the topic of renovictions.
I would absolutely support policies to ensure the renters have the supports that they need. I have been both a tenant as well as a landlord, a small landlord in Waterloo, and I've read the Tenancies Act as from both perspectives, and I know that there are clauses to ensure protection against bad faith. And that's what these renovictions are. They are an act of bad faith. And to Clayton's point, the landlord and tenant board is so backed up that these cases are not being heard if they are even put forward, and maybe renters don't realize that they do have rights already within the Residential Tenancies Act. And so I would want to put forward regulations to ensure that they are well informed before any landlord tries to evict their tenants, and then there are more strict penalties for landlords acting in bad faith.
Go ahead, Catherine.
One of the things that Peter had said around making it illegal. So in the absence of provincial leadership by the Ford government, which totally opened the doors for renters to be abused and kicked out of their homes, there is a role for municipalities to play. And so I am encouraging the City of Waterloo to bring in their own renoviction ban. Other cities have done so. Ottawa is looking at this, but notably Hamilton and Toronto has brought it in. So they're creating some barriers for numbered landlords to actually go down this road. It's something that can happen, and it should.
Thank you, Catherine. Next topic, homelessness and encampments. Peter, we'll start with you on this topic. My question is, the number of individuals experiencing homelessness in the Waterloo region has doubled since 2021. That's point-in-time count conducted by regional staff and community organizations. What would you and your party do to aim to reverse this trend?
Homelessness is a very personal issue for me. Homelessness, it's about being able to afford a home by and large. And you know, if you've canvassed the encampment there in Kitchener, or you know, talked to homeless people here in the region, it's, you know, a lot of them aren't very visible. You might meet them in a Tim Hortons or something. They just can't afford the basics. It's the purse is just drawn too thin. We need supports for our people just by and large. Being able to save for rent has gotten harder than ever. Maybe we need to be a little bit more forgiving there. It comes back to non-market housing, making it actually affordable. Yeah, having enough money to put food on the table, pay for your rent, everything else you got to do. It's tough, and we need to make everything easier for our people here in Ontario.
Thank you, Peter. I asked the same question to you. Clayton, what would your party do to aim to reverse this trend?
Homelessness is a real issue in Ontario, or in not just Waterloo, but across all of Ontario. Last year, over 80,000 people experienced homelessness in this province. It is an embarrassment that a province this rich is failing this many people. We've got to make sure that we've got protection in there. That's going to involve building affordable housing like I was discussing earlier. But on top of that, protecting renters who are just one paycheck away from missing rent by providing them access to our zero interest loan fund. On top of that, municipalities have a role to play here. This government, the Ford government, has downloaded so many costs onto municipalities that they simply do not have the resources that they need to provide support, to support programs that actually lift people out of homelessness. We need to do more. So the Ontario Liberal Party is going to be a real partner to municipalities by uploading those costs to make sure that municipalities have a partner in their provincial government to work with you to address these challenges of homelessness and do better for the people of Ontario.
Thank you, Clayton. And I asked the same question to you, Shefaza.
There are various root causes for being unsheltered, and a weekend like this, the weekend where we had a lot of snow, showed us how important it is to have shelter. So the Green Party would take a housing first approach to work with people on the ground who have worked with people who are unsheltered and figured out what kinds of root causes are contributing to being unsheltered. So we take a housing first approach by ensuring that nonprofit organizations have the funding to build these deeply attainable affordable homes and units for the unsheltered in Waterloo as well as across Ontario, and provide the wraparound supports. Those wraparound supports, even though I say it like in one sentence, they are crucial to ensure that people's needs are met beyond just being sheltered so that they don't have to be outside again.
Thank you, Shefaza. And Catherine?
Thank you. And listen, The less housing is being built today than in 1955. So there's a supply issue here that needs to be addressed. But on the issue of encampments, I actually agree with Shefaza on those root causes. Things have gotten so bad in this province that, you know, we heard at an earlier debate that people are renting half of a bed for $381. Imagine that that is the province that Doug Ford has brought us. Our plan is to partner, truly partner with municipalities. AMO has actually a campaign on this, and they've cited the 80,000 Ontarians that are sleeping rough. They're sleeping in encampments, and these encampments are across the entire province. Uploading some of those core costs that Doug Ford and company downloaded to municipalities frees up the funding for local partnerships with not-for-profit sector and co-op housing. We need to build in those supports and that community into this housing model. It has never been more important.
Thank you, Catherine. My next two questions will go on further into homelessness and encampments, but Peter, I know that you wanted 30 seconds to offer rebuttal, so 30 seconds.
Yeah, just on the topic of shelters that Shefaza brought up, we have some shelters here in the Waterloo region, and do you guys know how many spaces they have? It's 0 in Waterloo, it's 0 in Kitchener. If you want a shelter, they'll offer you one in Cambridge, and if you've been talking to people about how these shelters go, you can lock up some of your stuff at the front, but it gets stolen pretty much every time you're there. I don't know that shelters are really the best solution here. It's not that I'm against them, it's that the better solution is actually providing people housing. And I think the federal government deserves a bit of blame for putting a little bit too much gas on the pedal with immigration and creating this problem.
Thank you, Peter. Continuing on the same topic, encampments. We will start with you on this, Clayton. Do you support the forced removal of encampment residents, and do you believe temporary designated encampment sites with sanitation and support services should be explored, and do you have other suggestions?
What Doug Ford's done here by making homelessness effectively illegal is a disgrace. He's trying to introduce a fine of $10,000 if you're sleeping in a tent. If you're sleeping in a tent, you don't have access to $10,000. It's absolutely disgusting. So I do not support the forced removal of these homeless encampments. We need to make sure that we're leading with empathy here, and that we're working with our municipalities to provide the support that people need for when they find themselves in homelessness. That's working directly with municipalities as strong partners to ensure that they can provide access to the services that they need. Because municipalities know their cities better than anybody, and every city is going to have slightly different needs. So we need to make sure that we're actually adopting all of the costs that Doug Ford has passed down onto municipalities right now, and we're uploading those back onto the province so that we can be a true partner to our municipalities to start supporting people to make sure that everyone has a place that they can call home.
And Shefaza, I ask the same question to you.
I think there are two parts to that question. So the first one, I do not support the criminalization of people because of their living situations. And when someone does not have sufficient funds to even invest in a half a bed, in under a roof, I don't think we should be charging them to remove their belongings from a place where they have found safety. But on the other hand, we do need to provide better supports and better areas where they can feel safe. And I agree that shelters are not the best way necessarily to go forward. It is a Band-Aid solution, but there needs to be a more holistic solution looking at increasing the housing supply, not just in terms of the buildings that we're building, but also the rate at which we are offering these units. And this is where the province needs to take accountability.
Thank you, Shefaza. And Catherine, obviously, yes, as Shefaza said, a two-part question. Do you support the forced removal, and what other suggestions would you have?
Yeah, I just want to say the debate that happened at Queen's Park on the forced removal was very heated, as it should be. We've fought hard against this piece of legislation. I also want to say there were some PC members on the other side that looked ashamed, as they should be. In fact, I wish the PC candidate was here today because we could find out how ashamed he felt about trying to kick people off encampments and send them to jail or fine them $10,000. I mean, what kind of mindset is this for the province of Ontario? Where we see encampments right now, we see people who have potential and who want to be part of society, they just cannot find shelter. In fact, it would surprise you perhaps to know that some of the people living in the encampment down by the Kitchener train station, they go to work. they are trying to live their lives, and they don't want to go to a shelter and feel compromised. So we would partner directly with people who know how to do this, the Working Center, House of Friendship, the YWCA. They know how to do this. We would be the resource for the funding.
Thank you, Catherine. And Peter, before I come to you, I will let our viewers know that the PC Party of Ontario, they did get extended the invitation to participate in this debate, and that invitation was declined. Peter, same question for you, sir.
I agree with my fellow candidates on this issue. Of course I don't support the forced removal of people from the temporary housing situation they find themselves in these encampments. Nobody wants to be living in an encampment. Nobody wants to be camped out in the woods or in the doorway of a business or what have you. Is this real? Like, are we actually doing this? We're actually criminalizing homelessness? This, like, I mean, for some people, a night in jail actually might be a warm bed and a hot meal, but this is ridiculous. I actually am in shock. Like, I've heard of this, but this is, I'm in disbelief. Like, it's not that I'm uninformed. It's just like, are these charges actually sticking? I don't, you can't, they don't have $10,000. Like, what are they talking about? It's absurd. This is ridiculous. Like, I don't know. This is, it's insane. It's just truly insane.
Thank you, Peter. I want to continue on this topic, just dovetail a bit off to the side here. And Shefaza, I'm going to start with you on this question. Do you support forced addiction treatment? And how would you advocate, rather, for Waterloo and beyond at the provincial level?
I think when you say forced, you know, we've put a bit too much emphasis on enforcement whenever we've had policies put forward, instead of leading with compassion, better understanding the people that we're trying to serve. When there are people who are working through addictions, they didn't just get there because they didn't have the help. You know, there's more to it than just their living condition or their or the habit, right? It's beyond just the habit. So I think I forgot the question. See, I was so passionate about this. I don't want enforcement.
What would you do to advocate in Waterloo and at the provincial level?
Absolutely. I would refer to the people who have worked on this more deeply and listen to what they're saying in terms of providing the supports that we need. And that is my time.
Thank you, Shefaza. Catherine, same question for you.
So it's a really, I mean, it just gives you some sense as to how wrong the conversation is going in Ontario on encampments, on addiction, on mental health, that you think that you can force people to get treatment. If you're forcing anybody to do anything, it's not usually very successful, I would say. And so we favor a supportive network around folks, and actually there's a lot of research and evidence out there that shows that this is actually very cost effective, right? You build the supports in to make people feel like they're validated and they're respected. I had the great pleasure to travel around with Sanguine and went to Better Tent City and talked to people who are experiencing homelessness, addiction, and their stories are profound. Forcing somebody into a situation does not seem like the most compassionate method, but also won't be successful. So it's a Doug Ford idiom that thinks that you can just, pass a law and make it all go away.
Thank you, Catherine. Peter, I asked the same question to you.
All right, so drug addiction is a health problem, not a criminal problem. And there's been a lot of approaches. BC tried decriminalizing all the drugs, was it a year and a half ago? And they did a half, it was a half measure. Maybe they were trying to aspire to the Portuguese model where they legalized or decriminalized all the drugs, and there's a legal possession amount, and if you're caught with more than that amount, you're faced with drug treatment or jail. You're given a choice. It's not forced treatment, and I think a lot of people, a lot of drug addicts, they want to quit, and maybe that nudge is exactly the kind of nudge they need to give it a shot. People don't like jail. Drug treatment's not so bad. I think that's the model that we need to be going after. I think BC, they just did a half donkeyed job of the approach. I think we should just try it again here in Ontario, but offer drug treatment instead of jail and see how that goes.
Thank you, Peter. And Clayton, same question for you.
Listen, we got to make sure that we're meeting people where they are here. Forced treatment isn't going to work, but we need to make sure that people have access to the healthcare and to the support that they need when they need it. I think supervised consumption sites can be a major component of this, to make sure that people have access to healthcare right away. Time and time again, the evidence has shown that cities with supervised consumption sites here have fewer overdoses. They have less public drug use. I understand some of these concerns here, but these are an instrumental part to the way that we actually fight and make sure that we're providing support to people when they need it here. Some argue that these sites are promoting drug use, but the reality is that people are already using, that these are an effective tool to actually make sure that everyone is safe and that they've got access to the support that they need. Because, quite frankly, if people don't have the opportunity to survive long enough to actually seek support, then we're failing people. So we absolutely need to make sure that we're protecting people and making sure that they have access to the healthcare that they deserve when they need it and when they're ready.
Thank you, Clayton. Peter, 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Yeah, okay. There is a drug treatment and drug testing center on Duke Street in Kitchener that is doing wonderful work, and they are at risk of closing. Last I heard, they are going to be closing this year, and they need to be funded. People need to be talking to their municipal leaders and urging them to fund this better, and at that regional level of government that everybody forgets about. You know, there's municipal and region of Waterloo level of government. I believe that's how that's funded. We could be doing a lot more at the provincial level. I think we need to expand that program because it does a lot of good.
Thank you, Peter. All right, we're going to change topics now. Next question I have regards our LGBTQIA2S plus community. Catherine, we will start with you. Question is simple. How will you ensure that Waterloo is a safe and inclusive space for all of your constituents, including members of our LGBTQIA2S plus community?
Well, thank you so much, Sean, for the question. I mean, I have a long-standing history of supporting the community here in Waterloo Region from when I was first a trustee, bringing in an equity policy back in 2006-07, and then also carrying forward that work to Ontario's legislature. So I think that the community has to look towards people who have raised their voices and spoken up when their healthcare has been compromised. We even had, a treatment that was actually funded by OHIP in Ontario to run conversion therapy. We fought that. That should never have been covered by OHIP. So I would encourage the LGBTQ community to look to champions who have already raised their voice and show up for that community in Waterloo, at the provincial level, and even at the federal level, because the gaslighting from the federal government on some of these issues has been very disturbing going forward.
Thank you, Catherine. And Peter, a question for you. How would you ensure a safe and inclusive space?
I think the question is about respect and compassion and being polite to people. You know, you don't dead name people. You address them by the gender they want to be addressed as. You use people's pronouns. I think it's just a thing of respect. I know that the previous Liberal government created some legislation involving I believe the creation of a human rights tribunal that was going to police all this. You might remember Jordan Peterson had a whole spiel about this. This is how he actually, rose to prominence, and he was concerned about, freedom of speech and having that policed and not, getting yourself thrown in jail for accidentally, using the wrong pronoun. That turned out to be a whole crock of doo-doo. That was not, realistic at all. And okay, you knock on doors, and this is actually something people talk about surprisingly, is, book readings at the library by members of the LGBT community. They feel like they're, they feel as though that these children are being taught some things that it's so wrong. It's not this case at all. Sorry about the time.
Your time. That's okay, Peter. Thank you for acknowledging that. I'll proceed on to you, Clayton.
This is a question of respect. We need to make sure that absolutely everybody, regardless of their identity, is shown the respect that they deserve in this province. And a lot of that comes down to education, familiarity. I'm seeing a lot of really scary rhetoric around minorities, around 2S LGBTQ+ folks. And we need to make sure that this isn't a scary topic. People are who they are, and we need to make sure that they are proud to show who they are in public without fear of being attacked just randomly on the street. So we need to make sure that we're promoting education, We need to make sure that we're promoting that these are people living their lives just like you and really defending against that. That's creating opportunities for the public, for absolutely everybody to learn about who they are, to learn more about how people live their lives so that everyone can be treated with respect in this community.
Thank you, Clayton. And Shefaza.
Thank you. I think that human beings tend to compartmentalize a lot, and we have a lot of kind of us versus them mentality, which breaks down when we actually talk to other people and we get to know about them, we get to learn about them and share our histories and share our experiences and realize, okay, we were all cold when it was snowing. We're all human beings. And to create those areas, those opportunities to connect, we need to have better communities, not just neighborhoods where you have a house or you have a building and that's where you go to live and sleep. But there needs to be places to gather. There needs to be more active transport options so that people can connect with each other. They can see each other on the road and say hi. And there can be more events at community centers that center on all types of communities, right? Beyond just the LGBTQ plus community and create that inclusion.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just 30 seconds for rebuttal, Catherine.
Peter had mentioned around it being about respect. And I think, of course, that is true, but also it's up to law, right? You shouldn't be able to discriminate against a gay couple from renting an apartment because they are gay. So we, at the Ontario Legislature, over the last years, we brought in some safeguards through law, and one of them includes Toby's Law. And I think that this, again, speaks to the importance of having informed voices who are willing to take the chance and put themselves out there and defend the community.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you to the four of you for your thoughtful answers to that question. Next question. Peter, I will come to you first on this, and I think it's appropriate. I heard this as an important thing for you in your opening statements. The topic is voter apathy and voter disengagement. Voter disengagement is becoming a growing concern. What do you say to the voters in the Waterloo riding who are reluctant to vote because they think their vote won't matter?
All right, I got a lot of things to say about this. So if you are a student, by and large, statistically, you don't vote. And what ends up happening is politicians don't put items on their platform to represent you as a student. So if you don't like any of these candidates up here, spoil your ballot or decline your ballot. You want that statistic to show up that you actually came and voted so that, you know, the next time we get a snap election, politicians are catering to you. Declining your ballot, that's something you can do provincially. It's, you know, a big middle finger to the candidates there. But, you know, it speaks to things. Voter engagement, okay, the voter turnout last time was 40%. That speaks to a province who doesn't like the choices that they've been offered. I'm campaigning on an interesting idea of tying the length of our government's mandate to the voter turnout. And it's an interesting idea because, like, okay, it disincentivizes voter suppression tactics. It incentivizes, you know, getting out and voting because people don't want, you know, frequent elections. It incentivizes the government to get, you know, people supporting them, making popular policy.
Thank you, Peter. Clayton, same question.
Every single vote matters. Your vote matters, and it's how you communicate to a government what you care about, what your priorities are. And constantly, what really worries me is that we've seen declining voter engagement consistently. We need to make sure that we're putting forward a plan that people can actually be excited about. Amongst young people are voting in lower numbers than they have in history, and that's because they don't see a future here in Ontario. So what we need to do is make sure that we're proposing a plan that people can actually get excited about. It's going to make a real difference in their lives. That's why the Ontario Liberal Party is committed to supporting young people by making housing actually attainable to more people, to making education more accessible by cutting interest rates on OSAP, and, quite frankly, to make sure that they've got access to stable jobs once they do graduate. Young people need to be engaged. We need to care about this. This is certainly not only them that aren't voting, but everyone needs to understand that their vote matters, and it's how you communicate to our government. The Ontario Liberal Party has a plan. It's going to take bold actions to fixing the crumbling healthcare system in Ontario, and I think that's a reason to vote and stand up for an Ontario that values public healthcare.
Thank you, Clayton. And Shefaza, what do you say to voters who think that their vote doesn't count?
The most heartbreaking thing that I heard on the campaign trail was someone who said, "I have no voice." And unfortunately, it is so true right now because of the way our first past the post system works. And it's disappointing, really, because the voters feel like their needs are being politicized and they're being debated by politicians, why would they trust us? Why would they trust us to make a better future for them? But the reality is that this is a democracy. And the only way that a democracy continues to function is with people. And if people themselves are going to turn away, then the government is going to bulldoze and compromise our future. So I say that show the government that you are united and you will put your voice forward, and email your MPs, MPPs, vote.
And Catherine.
Yeah, no, this is an issue that I care deeply about. I do want to say, I think it is important for party platforms to be reflective of what we hear in our community and inclusive of the voices of youth, of seniors, of the entire community, quite honestly. And so we go through a lot of effort to engage people so that they see themselves in the housing policy, in the healthcare policy, and the affordability with our grocery rebate, for instance. But I just want to make sure that folks watching understand that Doug Ford doesn't want you to vote. This election is voter suppression in action. The last time Ontario had a February election was 1883. The snowdrifts are a barrier. The cold is a barrier for seniors to get out of their homes. And people are genuinely worried about this. Doug Ford doesn't want you to vote. I need you to get out, to share your voice, to share your perspective, and to demonstrate to Doug Ford that he can't manipulate the entire province of Ontario.
Thank you very much, Catherine. In a moment, we will proceed to closing statements, but Peter, you wanted 30 seconds for rebuttal.
Yeah, Shefaza brought up first past the post, and yeah, we need electoral reform, don't we? I know federally, Trudeau campaigned on that in 2015, the last election under first past the post. And now more recently, he says he wishes he did that. And isn't that funny, when your party is losing popularity, you want electoral reform. You had the power all along. I don't know what my fellow candidates, you know, do you guys want ranked ballots? Do you guys want proportional representation? I'd just love you if you guys would take a stance on that. Yeah.
All right. So we're going to go on to closing statements. Feel free to include your answer in your closing statement if you would like. Closing statements, 1 minute each. And Clayton, we will start with you.
Thank you, Sean. On February 27th, Ontarians have a tough decision ahead of them. For me, at least, it's easy. This election is about protecting public health care, about making sure that people actually have the ability to afford living in Ontario, to make sure that we're protecting our public our education system. Our post-secondary system is in ruins because of underfunding by Doug Ford. He is actively attacking the systems that we rely on, or so many Ontarians rely on, and it's making Ontario a tougher place to build a future. On February 27th, we finally have the chance to get rid of a government that has never put you first. The Ontario Liberal Party is going to fight hard to make sure that you've always got access to public health care system. We're going to make sure that universities are funded properly so that you're getting access to a quality education and, moreover, that students can actually afford it. And we're going to drive down the cost of living by making sure that life is more affordable for absolutely everybody by decreasing your taxes and doubling ODSP. On February 27th, I encourage you to vote for me, Clayton Moore, your Ontario Liberal candidate.
Thank you, Clayton. Closing statement from Shefaza.
I'm running because I believe that we have a voice and we can do something. And so I think that take your time, look at the platforms of all the parties, look at the candidates, look at who is listening to you and representing you. And make the choice, not just on February 27th, but any time before February 27th. Advanced polls open, returning office, election office is open until February 26th for you to cast your vote so that you can make sure that the weather won't be an impediment. And show the government that you do have a voice. Check out the Green Party platform to see if the positions we've put forward align with you, and I hope to see that you will vote this election.
Thank you, Shefaza. And closing statement from Catherine.
Yes, please vote. As you know, my name is Catherine Fife, and I have served this community for over 12 years. I like to look at the things that I've been able to push the envelope on childcare, on two-way all-day go, education, healthcare, and of course mental health. But I also want to let you know that I believe that this community has taught me about leadership. They're very engaged and they hold me to account. And that's the way our democracy is supposed to work. Look at who did not show up here. In Waterloo right now, they have our riding as a toss-up between myself and a PC candidate who doesn't show up, who doesn't even live in the riding. This is Doug Ford's manipulation of this election. Voting and participating in our democracy is actually a really strong thing to do against a leader, a premier of this province, who quit his job to call this election when we needed a stimulus package and an economics package to deal with the tariff threat. On February 27th, vote for Catherine Fife.
Thank you, Catherine. And the final word, final closing statement, Peter House.
Hi, I'm Peter House. This is all about, I like, my fellow candidates here. We're all on the left, but I think this is a different approach at the Electoral Reform Party because, as lovely as many of the things my fellow candidates are campaigning on, it's all predicated on having enough power in government to actually pass any of this lovely legislation. And that's not going to happen without serious changes to our democracy with electoral reform and with better accountability of government. So, you can elect somebody from one of these bigger parties, but I'm looking a few election cycles ahead and saying, look, we can build a new party, we can have a better democracy, and it's going to take, an election cycle or two, but it doesn't matter what party you're running for in this city of Waterloo because this is a student-dominated riding, the most student-dominated riding in all of Canada. And if the students are behind you, you could pull off an amazing upset. So come out, vote on February 27th, or vote in the advanced polls at Bridge Street, and I'll see you on Election Day.
Thank you, Peter. And thank you to all four of our candidates for taking part in the local campaign here on Rogers TV. Shefaza Esmail from the Green Party, Catherine Fife from the NDP, Peter House, Electoral Reform Party, and Clayton Moore from the Liberal Party. Thank you to all of our volunteers and our producer, David Aguiar, for making this happen. Thanks to Rogers TV for providing this forum for all of our candidates to speak directly to you. And as all of these candidates have said, get out and vote, please, on February the 27th or early. Thank you.